I've heard a lot of people having sex on the cup.
All right, welcome back to Ducks Morning Brew. That Ducks win video was for Friday. I had to put it in there. We didn't get to do the Ducks win all last week because the 3-game losing streak, they snap it against the Sens. Obviously lost last night against the Leafs. We'll get into both of those games and break them down a little bit and how maybe last night's loss isn't as bad as it seemed on the final scoreline. Yesterday too, I went out and checked out Sasha Pastujov in Guelph with Mark. So shout out to Mark for coming out and checking out the game with me. That was a lot of fun. He only picked up one assist in a 7-3 win for the Guelph Storm, but the game was awesome. He had a lot of chances and looked like the player that the numbers suggest he has been this year. And we'll talk about Sean Tschigerl, and he had back-to-back 4-point games over the weekend, and he started to heat up for the Calgary Hitmen, which has been another addition to the Ducks' many prospects this year that have started to get going offensively. So he's just another name on the list, and I don't think we've chatted about him at all this year, so it'll be nice to get into him and see how he's been doing this year. But we'll start off with the last couple games, and as I mentioned, the Ducks won Friday night 4-0 against the Ottawa Senators. It was the must-win game of the week in the sense that the other games prior to this were a little bit more difficult against tougher opponents, and this was against a Sens team that had won, I think, once in the month of November, so it was a game you had to go in there and win and look good. And the Ducks did that, and they got goals from Isaac Lindstrom, Derek Grant, Troy Terry on the power play, and Ricard Raquel. Trevor Zegras picked up an assist, and I thought Jamie Drysdale looked really good in that game. And all around, it was a dominant performance. Obviously, Stolarz getting the shutout, too. He made 34 saves. A bit of an easier performance than the 34 saves suggest, but it was a good team win for the Ducks in a game that they had to win to snap the losing streak. And they've been full value, I think, the Ducks have had this year for beating teams they should beat. And I think that's where you start to see some progress. Like I've seen people say, "Oh, well, the Ducks are just beating teams that they should," and like that's a bad thing. Well, the last couple of years, the Ducks were one of those teams, and every time that a better team or even an average team comes into the building, it was a game where we have to win this game. Like it's the Ducks, you have to beat them. And the Ducks didn't have any of those must-win games because they were one of those teams over the last couple of years. You'd roll into Ottawa and be like, "Okay, this is an equal matchup." Or you roll into Arizona, this is an equal matchup. The Ducks were just as bad as these teams over the last couple of years. We've moved now into an area where the expectations, because of how well the Ducks have been this year, are higher, that you have to win these games. Like, you're better than this team, you have to win. And I don't think it's a bad thing to say, the Ducks have won the games they should win. And they've lost some games that against better opposition. Toronto and Colorado in the last two big losses the Ducks have had. And even Winnipeg earlier on, I thought the Ducks outplayed Winnipeg in that 5-1 loss we've mentioned before. But in the games that the Ducks have lost and have lost big, they're against some of the best teams in the league. And they're just not at that level yet. Colorado and Toronto and even Winnipeg are at a different level in terms of where they are right now. The Ducks have moved on from a team that everybody should beat to an average team that can compete with most teams, even the good teams, on a nightly basis. Maybe they don't win, but they compete, and they beat the teams they should, the teams in the bottom half of the standing. So there's some progress there. So I wouldn't, overcode this Ottawa game and say, it means nothing. Like, they have to beat this team. Well, yeah, but last year they wouldn't beat this team, or it would be a closer game than it was, and I thought they dominated this game. And the game against the Leafs, too, like, the scoreline looks really bad at 5-1. But if you go look at the underlying numbers of that game, the Ducks stuck around in that game. The expected goals, I think, were 2.39 to 2.29 for Toronto. The Corsi for percentage was in the Ducks' favor. The scoring chances were in the Ducks' favor. High danger chances, I think, were even. So the Ducks were right in this game. I think Jack Campbell had an amazing game. Trevor Zegras had 8 shots on goal, a few great moves. I think he walked TJ Brody like 5 minutes into the game and couldn't convert the breakaway. The Ducks had enough chances to win that game and to at least get a point out of that game, but Toronto took advantage of the chances they had. There were some defensive miscues that led to some of the goals for the Leafs, and Jack Campbell had a great game, as he has all season, and it's a tough opponent to go against. The Leafs are, I think now, points-wise, after winning this game, the best team in the league, or tied for the most points in the National Hockey League. And you're going to have a tough night against these teams. They don't need a lot of chances to make you pay. And it was one of those nights for the Ducks. And it was a better game than Colorado, right? In the sense that the Ducks got overwhelmed by Colorado, and it felt like a game from last year where they were just completely outmatched. Again, another 5-1 loss, similar to the one against Winnipeg last night in Toronto, where it doesn't feel like a 5-1 loss. They were in it. They had stretches where they were the better team for long periods of that game. But they just couldn't convert on their chances, and that will come when you get some better players in here, some more finishers as this team progresses, as guys like Zegras and Drysdale comes back in, some of the younger guys start to take some steps forward and get better. You'll eventually get to the point where the Leafs are right now, where you go into every game expecting to win, and you're the better team heading in, or the favorites heading into the majority of the games, except for against the elite top 5 teams in the league. So I don't think we can get too critical of the way the Ducks played. I think when you look at the numbers, Zegras, Raquel, and Milano were great in both games. They didn't pick up any points last night. Obviously, Raquel had a goal and an assist against the Sens. Zegras had an assist. Milano had an assist. Zegras had 2 assists in the game against Ottawa. And then he had 8 shots last night. Should have had a goal. Raquel had a few good chances. Milano had a few good chances. They were buzzing. Those are positive signs for the Ducks, that even in a loss like that line was very good. And we're arguably the best line of any team, of both teams out there. So that's good going forward. And especially with, I wouldn't say they've cooled down, but they've certainly, the production hasn't been there for Getzlaf, Henrique, and Terry over the last 4 or 5 games since the Troy Terry's point streak ended. So you need another line to step up here, and it's great that with Raquel coming back, that the Zegras, Milano, Raquel line has been so good. But and I want to mention one thing too. Somebody said, I don't know who said it on Twitter, but they had mentioned now, this game shows that the Ducks are pretenders and they're not, and they're not a real team and they're just the same team as last year. No, that's unfair to go and say that. When at that point you're looking at the scoreline, you're not looking at the game itself and the underlying numbers that show the Ducks were in this game. They deserved to get a point. They played well, and they lost 5-1. You can play well and lose 5-1. And, again, it was 3-1, an empty netter, and then at that point, you're, with a minute and a half to go when the Wayne Simmons scored the 5th goal, the Ducks were out of it. And that was a poor finish to the game to not really stick around. But it's tough. I mean, you're down 4-1 after a game you felt like you deserved to get something out of. And a bad play defensively, a rebound that bounces right to Wayne Simmons, and he converts it. It's a tough one. But I wouldn't say the Ducks are pretenders, and I wouldn't even put them in the same breath of the Ducks team from last year. They've showed a lot better play, a lot more compete this year. And it's a cop-out to say, they lost to Toronto, and they lost in a bad way, and they've lost 4 of their last 5 to some very good teams in Carolina and Colorado and Toronto and even Nashville. To say they're pretenders is a little bit unfair at this point, I think. But let's get into Sasha Pastujov, the highlight of my day yesterday, because the Ducks game, albeit they played well, was not a fun outcome at the end of the day. But went to Guelph to go see Sasha Pastujov play. For a friend of the show, Mark, came out with me. We went to go check out the game. First time going to Guelph for I think for both of us to Sleeman Center. Unfortunately, Pastujov was cooled down a little bit. He had a 7-game goal scoring streak before I bought the ticket, so I guess you can blame me. And then 2 games over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, he didn't record a goal or a point. Yesterday, Guelph was up 7-3, so you would imagine that he would probably be a big part of that. But unfortunately, he just had a secondary assist in that game. But the good thing was, actually going to watch him. I didn't watch him in obviously the 2 games. He didn't record a point on Friday and Saturday, but he was all over the place. He was one of the better players in terms of just the skill level and the offensive ability he had on display. I think he had 5 or 6 shots in the game. Looked really engaged. Made a few nice moves around the defender. He had a really good play in the offensive zone where he basically deked around the entire Erie Otters team and kept control of the puck. It was a pretty impressive play, and he got a nice shot off at the end, but the goaltender had his number all night. I think he had about 4 or 5 of his shots saved with a glove hand of both goaltenders because Erie ended up pulling their netminder. But really fun to go out there and watch him play and see how the team uses him, because obviously the numbers speak for themselves this year with the fact that he has 18 goals and 14 assists in 21 games, 98 shots on goal, second in the entire league, and he had a 7-game goal scoring streak for a bit there. So clearly he knows what he's doing down there, and it's a matter of time before he gets going again. It wasn't going to last forever. He wasn't going to score in every game heading into the rest of the season here, but he'll get back up. This team looks like a very good team this year, a little bit of a surprising team. Because nobody expected them to do as well as they have, and a lot of that has been because of the addition of Sasha Pastujov. But I got full confidence in the upcoming weeks here that he'll get back going. I know he's on the radar for Team USA for the World Junior Championships. I expect him to go there and play well, and potentially play on a line, or at least on the team, with Jacob Perreault. So that will be a lot of fun to watch for him. But yeah, unfortunately, I was hoping he'd get on the board. I was hoping he'd have a big game to rebound from a couple pointless games on Friday and Saturday. But still a lot of fun checking him out. I'm going to have to go to a few more games to hopefully catch him on a good night. And lastly, I want to talk about another Ducks prospect, this one out of the WHL from last year's draft, Sean Tschigerl. He actually had a great weekend. He had back-to-back 4-point games to lead the Calgary Hitmen to, I think it was a 7-0 and a 10-1 win over their two opposition over the weekend. So he's been on fire as of late. In the last 6 games for him, he has 7 goals, 6 assists for 13 points. He's second on his team in scoring. And he leads the league, the entire league, in shorthanded goals with 4. So you have 4 shorthanded goals in 18 games this year. And he's just a really good, well-rounded prospect. One of those guys who just works hard. He can be pretty much on any special teams unit. Probably a second power play guy at the NHL level, and a penalty killing specialist. Reminds me a little bit of Andrew Cogliano, maybe not with the speed. But again, the finishing ability is suspect whether it will translate to the NHL, but he just competes on every shift, and he's just a real weapon and threat shorthanded. And I mean, obviously the numbers speak for themselves this year with 4 shorthanded goals already. So he's a guy I look forward to seeing how he progresses to the NHL level, because the compete's always going to be there. The work ethic, his defensive prowess is going to translate pretty well. The only question is, how well does the offense progress from junior to the pro level? And I mean, obviously that's the big thing for a lot of these kids, is can they take what they're doing at this level and bring it to the pro level. Braden Tracy had the struggles last year going from the WHL to the AHL, and now he started to get going this year. So it does take a bit of time sometimes for them to adjust and get going. But either way, Sean Tschigerl either has a spot in the bottom 6 if the offense doesn't really get going at the pro level, or he could potentially be a middle 6 player where he could jump up onto a second line of a competitive team and be a real nice weapon for them. But his bread and butter is going to come on special teams as a penalty kill threat, and just a really effective workhorse for any team. So I'm hoping he does make it. It's going to be a little bit of a project for him to get there. I expect him to probably play at least next year, if not his full eligibility in the WHL, then a year or 2 in San Diego, and he's a bit of a project for the future. But he'll be a nice piece when he does get there. And the Ducks have a ton of middle 6 forwards in the pipeline, and guys who are already at the NHL level. So there's going to be a lot of competition for roster spots. But he is one of those players that every team loves to have. And I think the Ducks are really happy with where they got him and how he's progressed so far. That's going to do it for Monday's episode of Ducks Morning Brew. Thanks everybody for coming out. Hope you had a great weekend. We've got 4 more shows lined up for the rest of the week here. Also, for anybody who's wondering where the regular podcast was, we had a bit of scheduling issues. Obviously, I was unavailable on Sunday because of the Ducks versus Leafs game, and heading to Guelph to go watch Sasha Pastujov. And a few of the other guys had some plans that got in the way of a podcast this weekend. But we are planning on hopefully recording that either tonight or early tomorrow or Wednesday. We want to get this out before, obviously, next weekend, before it's all old news. So we'll keep you updated on that, on when the regular podcast is going to come out. And we're going to break down the last week of Ducks hockey and get into some more of the topics we've even talked about on here in more depth, with a few different opinions as well. So stay tuned to that one. Appreciate you guys coming out to Ducks Morning Brew today, and we will see you tomorrow morning. Take care, guys.